Le'Veon Moss is the most important player on Texas A&M's roster for 2025. I'll tell you why on today's episode of Locked On Aggies.
You are Locked On Aggies, your daily podcast on the Texas A&M Aggies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on into Locked On Aggies. I'm your host, Andrew Stefaniak. Thanks for making Locked On Aggies your first listen every single day. On the show today, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to talk a little bit about what happened last night on the hardwood. This basketball team is really getting into a dark place with not a lot of ball games left. So we're going to talk about the loss to Vandy, but we're going to start the show off. I've got 10 names here, and I spent about an hour, maybe half an hour-ish making this list today of the 10 most important players on Texas A&M's roster for the Aggies to be successful next year, this season. And, you know, there were a lot of names I left off. I mean, there was probably 30 names I had like in the conversation to be on this list. And I broke it down to 10 names. I mean, and once again, there were a lot of names that were not on this list that I think were more than deserving to be on this list. But the number one player for me, most important for Texas A&M to be successful in 2025, is Le'Veon Moss. And the reason a lot of people would say Marcel Reed, and I'll go ahead and spoil number two. It's Marcel Reed, and we'll get to that in a minute. But I think a lot of folks would say to themselves, why is Marcel Reed not the most important player on the roster? Pretty much every team, the quarterback is the most important player on the roster, right? I mean, that's pretty universal. We agree on that. With Texas A&M and how much Colin Klein is going to want to run the football this season, I think that it's easy to make an argument that Le'Veon Moss is the most important player on this Texas A&M roster for next season. You know, a guy that had incredible numbers before going down with that injury against South Carolina. I mean, we'll pull up the all of the numbers on Moss here. Well, what was he was at? Almost over 700 yards, right? He was at, on 121 carries last year. Moss ran for 765 yards, 10 touchdowns, 6.3 yards per tote. He also caught 10 passes for 141 yards. So if you do the math on this, if you run the crunch the numbers on this, you know, he basically played the first possession against South Carolina, which means that he missed, what would that have been? That would have been how many? That would have been the Auburn game, South Carolina game, the Texas game. Auburn, Texas. He missed 3 games and the bowl game, right? I believe. So, I mean, if you do the math based on his numbers, so he played in before that injury. That means he would have played in 9 games, right? And you can't really count the South Carolina. So, I mean, the point is he was on pace to rush for probably 1,300 yards. And the reason that that's so impressive to me, and once again, I mean, I just crunched the numbers. I paused and crunched them. So, I mean, you know, you look at that, that means that Moss played in 8 football games. Obviously, he played in the South Carolina game, but got hurt right in the beginning. So he basically, we'll say he missed South Carolina, New Mexico State, Auburn, Texas, and the bowl game. So he was rushing for pretty close in those 8 football games to 100 yards per game because he was at 765 yards. Let's get the exact number on that then. 765 divided by 8. So it's 95.6 yards per game. So basically, if he would have played all 13 games with 95 times 13, he would have run for 1,235 yards this year. And I think the reason that's so impressive is, once again, he's doing that on 6.1 yards per carry. He's doing that, splitting the workload with Amari Daniels, and last year a little with EJ Smith. And so, I mean, thinking about the season he would have had if he got 28 carries a game, like that's like terrifying. So, yeah, I think knowing the offense that Texas A&M runs, Le'Veon Moss, I think, is the most important player on this roster. I really do think that. The next player, like I said a moment ago, it's Marcel Reed. There's going to be games where, as good as Le'Veon Moss is and as good as he's going to be this year, you're going to need to get things going through the air, or maybe you're getting stuffed at the line a lot and you need Marcel Reed to get going with his legs. I mean, even on a team that wants to run the football, you still need a quarterback that is able to, you still need a quarterback that's going to be able to find a way to succeed and throw the football and get the ball downfield and all that. So, yeah, I mean, I'm definitely in a spot where I think Marcel Reed's the second most important player on this roster. I think if you were on a team that was a more pass-heavy team, he'd be number one, and Moss would be number two. But, this is the team that we got here, and I think that that you got to kind of sit back and look at this and say Marcel Reed has to have a special season for you to be great. So, the number 3 player on this roster, most important player on this roster, to me, is Will the Blanket Lee. And, I think that for the struggles that we saw in the Texas A&M secondary last year, I think Will Lee did a lot well. I was impressed with the way that Will Lee, found a way to still put up some good numbers and make some good things happen, despite how rough the secondary was at times. And I mean, was Will Lee perfect? Was he dominant in every way, in every single aspect? I'm not going to sit here and say that. But what I am going to sit here and say is that he had a season where it's very clear to see a world where he's going to improve next year and he can take that step. I mean, we are begging for Texas A&M secondary to take a step to the next level. And I mean, if he's not able to do that, it's going to hold back this secondary because they're going to need him to do that. That's just the reality. So, yeah, I really want to see Will Lee step up. I want to see Will Lee get better because we know he's good, but he can be better. And I want to see him take that next step. The 4th most important player on this roster is Casey Concepcion, the wide receiver, the transfer from NC State, comes over and he's set to be the wide receiver 1 for the Aggies in year 1 here. And I mean, I think that he is going to find a way to have a really good year. And I mean, I think that it's going to be, a season for Concepcion that if Marcel Reed is able to develop, if he's able to get his game to that next level, I think he's going to be really special. I really do think that. And Concepcion, he's the guy that when you watch the film on him, it's hard to not see a world where he's an NFL wide receiver. I think that a good year this year is going to take him to that next level. I think that he's more than capable of doing that. So that is one thing that I'm going to be monitoring this year is how good can Marcel Reed be and how can he help his wide receivers? Because Casey Concepcion, I mean, he's one of those receivers that can beat you in so many ways. He's shifty. He's quick. He's a great route runner. He can get open. He can win the 50-50 ball. It's very rare. It's rare for him, but he can do it. I saw a few clips of it. He can beat you in every single way. And that's what I love about Casey Concepcion. He's going to be wide receiver 1 on this team. And I think, is he going to go for 1,000 yards? I'm not sure if I'm buying that just based off the way that Texas A&M is going to play offense and based on the way, Colin Klein plays the game. But I think that Casey Concepcion is going to be over 800 yards. I think he's going to be in that 800 to 1,000 range. And he's going to either be right at 1,000 or right below it. So, I am 100% excited to see what is going to happen with Casey Concepcion this year. And I think it's going to take some development from Marcel Reed to make him special, but I believe that's going to happen. We've got 6 more players to talk about. when it comes to the most important players on this roster for Texas A&M to be successful. And then, of course, we've got to talk about the ugly loss for Texas A&M against Vanderbilt. We'll talk about all that coming up right here on Locked On Aggies. But first, I got to tell you about our friends over at Roy. Attention, Locked On Aggies fans. The future of college sports is here, and it's transparent. Before the Roy app, NIL negotiations often happened under the table, and fans didn't have a clear way to directly support the athletes they love. Now, with Roy, you get to be part of the change and support Texas A&M athletes in the most transparent way possible. You can choose the player you want to support, decide how much to contribute, and receive exclusive content from the athletes you back. The best part is if your player hits the transfer portal, you get your money back. It's a risk-free way to show your support. The Roy app is giving fans control. No more uncertainty. Now you can provide transparent, impactful support and help shape the team and the future of college sports with your contributions. Download the Roy app now from the App Store and start backing Texas A&M athletes the way they deserve with transparency, trust, and real impact. This is the future of college sports. Join it now by downloading Roy and supporting your favorite players. So the next name I have on this list, number 1 was Le'Veon Moss. Number 2 was Marcel Reed. Number 3 was Will the Blanket Lee. Number 4 was Casey Concepcion. The number 5 player I have is Cassius Howell. You know, I'm just telling y'all, and like we see right now, I mean, you're seeing in the NFL right now in this process, you are seeing Shamar Stewart take this step to, man, can this kid be a the number 1 overall pick? And I'm not saying that that's going to happen to Howell, but I think Howell is going to have a big enough season where he gets himself in that conversation of like, man, is this kid going to be a late first-round pick? Like, that's how good he can be this year. The PFF grades loved him. The eyeball test loves him. I mean, just everything checks out for Cassius Howell. And, yeah, I think he's going to take that next step and be an absolute star for the Aggies. I'm really bought into that. And I think, getting a pass rush, having a defensive line that is able to get after the quarterback, it's going to be really important for the Aggies. So I think that Cassius Howell having a good season is a top priority for Texas A&M. I mean, if you ask me right now, how many sacks do you think Cassius Howell could have this year? I would say, I mean, realistically, I believe there's a great chance that I believe it. I think he can get to 8 sacks. I think he has an outside chance to get to 10, but I think 8 is incredibly realistic. So that is exciting, knowing that. I think that it's going to be I think this is going to be the type of season for Howell where he really takes that game to the next level and he's going to be special. The next name on this list I have is Trey Zune. You're starting left tackle. It's impossible to have a list of the most important players on your roster and not have your starting left tackle listed. I mean, I think Trey Zune is going to take, once again, like all these players on this list, I think that he's going to elevate his game to the next level. I am really looking forward to seeing how he's going to do protecting Marcel Reed. I just think that he's going to make life miserable for pass rushers trying to get after Marcel Reed. He had a really good year this year. It seems like every year you watch Trey Zune, he gets better and better and better. I mean, and there were some points where some thought he was a liability, and it was a bit understandable. But, yeah, I mean, when I look at Trey Zune right now, I look at this and I say to myself, I think that he is one of the best left tackles in all college football. So I'm looking forward to seeing how he is able to take his game to the next level. And I think that he's going to turn himself into a day 2 pick in the NFL draft. I really think he's capable of doing it. But I mean, once again, you need your left tackle to be great, because if you want an offense that's going to flow, if you want an offense that's going to run, got to find a way for your left tackle to not let anybody touch his quarterback. So that's why I think it makes a ton of sense why Trey Zune is sitting there where he's sitting there. And I think he's a guy that is going to be dominant for the Aggies this year. And yeah, I think he'll be one of the best tackles in all college football. The next name I have is Terrion York. I think that Terrion York is the leader of this team. I mean, he's the guy that really helps you on defensively. He helps this team kind of stick together and play as one unit. And, it's exciting to see the way that he has developed as a leader during his time. I thought he had a good year last year. I was expecting him to have a little bit better of a year than he had, but it was still a solid year. And I mean, yeah, I think that he is going to continue taking his game to the next level. I believe he's an NFL player, and I think that he's got to be, the quarterback of this defense. That's who he is. He is the leader. He's a captain. Seeing a player be a captain as a true sophomore is absolutely absurd. So knowing that that's the reality for Will Lee, or for Willie, I looked at my list. That's the reality for Terrion York is incredibly impressive. But I think he's gonna have a really good year this year, and I think this will be his last year because I think he's gonna turn into an NFL player after this season. The next name I have on this list is none other than Terry Bussey. I mean, I think that Terry Bussey is going to have that type of impact where he goes from, the impact that we were hoping, I guess, DJ Hicks would have last year. He's going to have that 5-star sophomore year explosion breakout season type of impact. I think that he is destined to have it this year. So I'm looking forward to see what he's able to get done. And I still think there's a world where you could see him. Could he get involved in the secondary? I mean, that's the old staff wanted him to play corner. And then, of course, this new staff, he plays receiver. I mean, if there's struggles at corner, Terry Bussey's the type of football player. He's just an athlete. He's a dominant force. You can put him wherever you want, and he is going to dominate. So I think that Bussey, wherever it is, offense, defense, special teams, he's going to be great this year. The number 9 player I have, it's none other than DJ Hicks. I think he's a guy that we're begging to see continue to get better. I mean, super highly rated player. And he just, he's not been bad, but he's not been top 10, 5-star level player. And I think that is why that's destined to happen for him. I think it's coming this year. I think he's going to develop that game. And Texas A&M also, when you're losing Shamar Turner and Shamar Stewart and Nick Scorton, you need some players to step up and be really good on that end of the ball. So we desperately need to see DJ Hicks have a good season. Because if not, I think it's going to be hard for this defensive line to succeed. And then the last name I have is the transfer from Iowa State, Tyler Yinum. He's a guy that over the last week, I've bought more into him. I think that he's going to have a big season. He was such a great run stopper. And I think that, his ability to stop the run will help the pass rushers be able to get home, because you kind of feel confident, hey, you know what? We have some great players here that are going to be able to get after the pass rusher, but we feel safe knowing that Tyler Yinum is going to be there to get after the running backs while everyone else is getting after quarterbacks. So Tyler Yinum is going to have a special season. He's a good player. I think he's probably one of the best run stoppers in all college football. So I'm excited to see the type of season he has this year. The Aggies lose an ugly, ugly, ugly basketball game to the Vanderbilt Commodores. A game, it was the definition of a must win, knowing the game that you have coming up on Saturday. So we're going to break down this loss and talk about the future of this team coming up right here on Locked On Aggies. Life moves fast, especially when you have a family. One day you're watching your kids take their first steps, and before you know it, they're off to college. That's why securing their future is so important. Fabric by Gerber makes life insurance that fits your family needs so simple. With Fabric, you can apply for term life insurance online right from your couch. You could be covered in under 10 minutes, and in many cases, no health exam is required. As a parent, you want to make sure your family is financially protected no matter what happens. Fabric gives that peace of mind. You can get $1 million in coverage for less than $1 a day, so protecting your loved ones doesn't have to break the bank. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their families. Apply today in just minutes and meet fabric.com/LockedOnCollege. That's meetfabric.com/LockedOnCollege. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Insurance Company, not available in certain states. Price subject to underwriting and health questions. The Vanderbilt Commodores came to Reed Arena on Wednesday and beat the Aggies. I mean, a team that I said yesterday on the show when previewing this game, I said, listen, this Vanderbilt team is not a bad basketball team. I still think that some folks are in the under. Look at this and they say to themselves, well, I mean, we're talking about Vandy, football, basketball, all of these sports. I think it's a pretty common occurrence now because their football team was pretty darn good. They won some games they weren't supposed to. So a game where a kid in Tyler Nickel just gets absolutely hot and he goes 7 of 10 from 3. I mean, he's a good player and a pretty solid shooter. I mean, he's shooting 40% from 3, but I mean, it does feel like between Goodine from Oklahoma and Nickel from Vandy, guys that average 8, 7, 10 points a game are just coming in and giving you buckets. So, I mean, seeing him go for make 10 threes was awful frustrating. And Wade Taylor in this game, I mean, he gives you 21 points. 13 of those points come at the free throw line. But, I mean, once again, he shoots 3 of 10 from the field, 2 of 6 from 3. I mean, the efficiency just isn't there. You get 14 points from Zurich Phelps. Pharrell Payne had a darn good game going for 23 points. I mean, he was unstoppable. They could not stop him in this game. And it was really impressive to see that. I mean, he's earned everything he's got. He's been playing really good ball right now. So, you know, knowing this, I don't know what this team's got to do. I mean, Texas A&M is in a tough spot right now where, I mean, you got to go to Florida on Saturday, then host Auburn. You could lose 5 games in a row here. And, I mean, just plummet down the seeding, down the SEC tournament seeding. I mean, this has been just so frustrating because this team is better than this. But once again, until the offense is more efficient, and I get it. I get that, you know, Texas, but once again, I mean, we're supposed to be a defensive-minded team. Give up 86 points. Now, it feels like about 1 million of those points came in the I mean, it took 40 minutes to play 2 minutes of a basketball game, which needs to be fixed, by the way. That's beside the point. But just an ugly loss, and there's a lot to fix. You know, we'll get deeper into this, and we'll preview the Florida game on tomorrow's show. But I mean, if you go find a way to beat Florida, I think all's well. And I'd prefer if you had beat Vandy and Florida. But if you go find a way to beat Florida, I mean, I feel better about this. But I mean, Texas A&M's in a spot where this basketball team has got to figure it out or things get ugly down the stretch. That's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Aggies. Thank y'all so much for being here every single day. I really, really do appreciate it. Hope everyone has a great rest of their Thursday. We'll see you here tomorrow on Friday right here on Locked On Aggies.